This is one of the most grave transmissions we've ever engaged in. We finally, in the last day, got the UN treaty. They like to hide it on their own website. It was ferreted out by the newspaper, The Examiner, and we now have it. And we have confirmed it is the treaty. Ladies and gentlemen, we've all been told it, quote, allows self-defense. Yes, by states, governments. Because the UN before had said they even want governments disarmed. That's the State Department Memorandum 7277. So now they're coming out, and we have the quotes in an article, bombshell leaked UN treaty does ban guns. And notice, magical timing with the Batman shooting in Colorado, all the police reporting 2 shooters, witnesses 2 shooters, smoke bombs from 2 sides. Even Fox News, we had an article yesterday, local Fox said it doesn't add up. The mother didn't say her son had done it. She said they just said that. This stinks to high heaven, but if they stage Fast and Furious that's killed thousands, including several police officers, would they stage this? I don't know what Larry Pratt's going to say on this, but he joins us, then we'll get into the treaty. Mr. Pratt, great having you on such short notice. Out of the gates,
Great to be with you.
Thank you, sir. What is your take right now on this situation? What do you, I mean, obviously they're seizing on it politically. Obama's saying you shouldn't have semi-auto. We're seeing Michael Moore, all the usual suspects. Sure. Bloomberg's telling police to go on strike. We're going to cover all those points. But what does your gut tell you? And now a week later in the aftermath, what is the intel you've got on this shooting in Colorado? Am I wrong for being suspicious?
I don't think you're wrong. I would have disagreed with you before Fast and Furious because I never in my wildest fears would have thought that our government would actually premeditatedly kill some 400 Mexicans have been murdered and a couple of our U.S. agents. So after we caught them planning premeditatedly for a program that would get people murdered, one of the whistleblowers submitted a report on weekly briefings at ATF. And when the head of the ATF at the time would be given the increase in body counts in Mexico, he would say things like, good, the program's working. Well, so this was no mistake. This was not a sting operation gone bad. This was premeditated murder. Well, if our government would do that, then even though I think the evil of the human heart is sufficient to account for somebody that wants to go and shoot people at random, we've had, since we've been keeping records in this country, this has happened every few years since the 1870s. 10, 20, 30 people being murdered at a time. By the way, long before semi-automatics were available to people. So this is what human beings are capable of. And now we have to admit that maybe this is something that our government is capable of, because this is only 12 people murdered. They were good for 400 in Fast and Furious. Wow.
Well said. I've seen Mexican estimates of 2,000, but you're saying confirmed it's around 400?
Right, 400 when the guns were actually left at the murder scene. That doesn't mean that others haven't been murdered by people using these guns. It's just that we can actually tie the recovered gun back to the records that were being kept in Fast and Furious. Little Nazis keeping records of all of the things that were happening.
Unbelievable. And now we have the spectacle of them declaring executive privilege. I'm actually pleased how far the Congress has gone. I didn't think they would go this far, but I'd like to see them go further. But
we owe a tribute to Darrell Issa, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and to Charles Grassley in the Senate, although he didn't have the authority and the power that Chairman Issa has. Issa had to, in a sense, arm wrestle the Speaker to have the hearings, then to have the vote on contempt of Congress, and now it's his lawyers that are preparing to actually file charges in the federal court for the District of Columbia. Could very well happen before the end of this month, certainly early August. There might even be a resolution of that first complaint in the D.C. court sometime in September. There were 2 contempt citations. One was criminal, but that won't be heard until sometime next year because the backlog there is rather substantial. But civil cases move much more quickly in the D.C. court. And so as a nice little extra added feature for the election, we're going to be hearing about the mass murder committed by people under the direction of the Attorney General of the United States, and frankly, officials that one guy who reports directly to the president daily was involved in this, was routinely being briefed on how good a job they were doing with Fast and Furious.
Now, what is the sense in Washington? You just mentioned that there could be some criminal charges. What is the sense? Because if they can get away with Fast and Furious and lying about it and being caught, then they can get away with anything. I mean, it's either set up the executive as infallible and above the law, or we know this goes above Holder. It goes right up to Obama.
Yeah. Well, let's assume that the D.C. Court of Appeals, which for the District of Columbia, which is on the more liberal side, they don't manage to get a good judge or panel, and the panel says, no, Eric Holder didn't do anything wrong. We're not going to. He didn't need to supply any documents. Well, it can be appealed to the D.C. Court of Appeals, federal court, and there you have a much better shot at getting a sensible panel. Let's just hypothetically assume that the court says, Mr. Holder, cough up the records. My guess is Holder would rather go to jail for a few months on contempt of court rather than go to jail for a few lifetimes based on what may well be in those documents.
And that's what's really scary. If they exonerated them, they would release them. This is a no-brainer.
Exactly. Now, I think they're between a rock and a hard place, and the more this high-level poker game gets played out, it'll be more and more difficult for the Democrat media to continue to sweep this under the rug. But because we have an alternate media, certainly not the least of which is your radio program, more and more Americans are finding out that, what? Our government did what? And that is indefensible. So I think it will be one of the many reasons that the president goes down to defeat. I kind of agree. I think the economy is going to be a big factor, but certainly involvement in a blood-curdling scheme such as Fast and Furious, that's going to contribute as well.
Unless they engage in election fraud. And I'm normally not a person that's lesser of two evils. I kind of got mad at Rand Paul endorsing Romney, but Obama is so bad, saying that you didn't build a business, you didn't do jack squat, the government did it. I mean, it's like listening to Mao Zedong or something.
Well,
I mean,
precisely, it's listening to Saul Alinsky, and that's who the president's intellectual mentor has been. His works, he never met him personally, but he taught at Saul Alinsky's Industrial Areas Foundation, and the left does something that the right is not so good about. The left understands that personnel is policy. They seldom make a mistake in putting somebody in a position that doesn't completely toe the line. Republicans do it all the time. They'll take over a committee and say, oh, these are nice people. I've worked in the minority. They're professional. They're not political. That's stupid. That's why they're called the stupid party. The left doesn't make that mistake. For Obama to have been chosen to teach at that Industrial Areas Foundation, founded by Alinsky, means he's that same small c communist that Alinsky called himself. And that's what has been presented to the American people. I thought Obama was going to keep his mouth shut. I thought maybe he'd finally learned to stop lecturing us about why we need to be socialists, in particular on this gun issue of Fast and Furious and on the shooting out in Aurora. But yesterday, he couldn't keep the salute down to the Fuhrer, and he went off and said, we need to ban those AK-47s. In other words, we need to renew the Clinton gun ban.
You just gave an allusion to Dr. Strangelove where he can't help it. He's like,
Exactly.
He goes, small business didn't do jack crap, the state built it. And by the way, we should ban all semi-autos. I mean, he is committing political suicide in front of everybody. He just can't help it.
No, he cannot help it. I thought maybe he had learned, even somebody as ideologically driven as Nancy Pelosi, in the run-up to the 2010 elections, told Eric Holder, when he reiterated that he wanted a renewal of the semi-auto ban, of the Clinton gun ban, shut up, Mr. Attorney General. Don't talk like that, especially this close to an election. So even a hardcore leftist such as Nancy Pelosi is capable of understanding that, but apparently not the president. He's 24/7 full-time socialism, and I think that's what's going to produce, very likely going to produce, a tidal wave. If the last election was a wave election, this could well be a tsunami. The American people are right of center. And for Obama to just rub our faces in his red diaper is not going to go over.
Unless he knows something we don't know. Now expanding on this.
Well, let me just, because you had kind of alluded to the possibility of election fraud. Yeah, I think that will go on. But as we saw in Wisconsin, the response was so intense that I think Walker probably won by 14 points. So you've got to win pretty heavily in order to get the 7 by which Walker ended up.
Yeah, fraud. And I've talked to all the election fraud experts. You're right, Larry. Historically, the fraud can't beat landslides.
Right. Not landslides, and hopefully that's what we're talking about. And the president just went and gave the landslide another little push, another tectonic shift of the plates down below the sea level, the seafloor, so that tsunami gets even worse than it was going to be.
By the way, that's a nice chair you're sitting in. You didn't buy that or build that. A government did, and I like that lamp. I guess government built that, and that painting was painted by somebody in the government.
I'm glad you brought that up. If there is one organization in the country that can say we are here in spite of the government, it's Gun Owners of America.
Come on, Larry, you didn't just appear. Government created you in a tank. Me too. Now let's shift gears to the really grave news. Okay, Congress won't pass their gun grabs. So the ATF last year tried a shotgun ban that could be loaded in the bottom, just executive, tell 4 states to report on guns when it's already being reported by the NICS. They're obviously doing whatever they want. What about the UN treaty? You know, we finally got it, looked at it, it's finally out, and it says, oh, you've all got individual rights unless prescribed by this treaty. I mean, I've got all the quotes here. It says, yes, there are individual rights of states, but not of individuals, unless the state says it's cultural. Now, you notice Obama said in his speech, you can have some guns for culture, but nothing semi-auto. So it looks like they're going to go with that angle. What do you, France is in here with notes in the document saying we're going to use this to totally ban guns. So I mean, here it is, more deception by them saying they don't want our guns, but the UN confiscates guns all over the world.
I hope they do go ahead and sign the treaty. It's kind of like the president popping off yesterday about renewing the Clinton gun ban. If they do that, and the language is indeed as you are finding, and which is apparently fairly recently coming to light. I mean, we had heard rumors about various kinds of bans and dealing with the movement of firearms within countries. Here's what I think will happen. The Senate's not, even Harry Reid's Senate is not going to ratify it. But if the president were to be reelected, then he has no political restraint whatsoever on him for the next 4 years. And I can see him telling through the ATF, telling gun stores, you may not sell a handgun above caliber 380, which is a very popular form of gun control in many other countries around the world. You may not sell a semi-automatic rifle that can accept an open box magazine that could conceivably take 30, 40, 50 round magazines. That is the way gun control has worked in a lot of the rest of the world. And if you don't cooperate with us, Mr. Dealer, we're pulling your license, just like that. You're out of business that day.
Yeah, even Forbes did an analysis and said, well, the way it's, earlier drafts, where the UN says civilian ownership of firearms threatens a legitimate power monopoly of the state. I mean, look at where these people control things. New York, Chicago, guns are banned, basically. D.C. overturned, but still almost impossible.
Right.
I mean, we know their goal, their quotes. We know what they want worldwide. But this new treaty basically is written in legalese to say you have rights, but then they take them away with the next breath, kind of like the UN Declaration of Human Rights does, Larry. So my point is that why would they be so arrogant as to even try this when they know it's not going to fly here?
Well, that was my assumption also. And so when we began to pick up reports, even from somebody willing to talk to us within the UN, who's right on top of what's happening with this whole process, saying, look, there is still a 50-50 chance that this is going to come apart, that there's a lot of dissension among the member governments. It's not a done deal yet, but don't don't count on it not happening. It still could happen. We were warned. And so my view is it really doesn't matter about the treaty itself. What matters is whether or not the president is reelected. Because if he's reelected, Katie, bar the door.
And that was my next question. Joseph Farah 4 years ago did not endorse McCain. Neither did I. And again, I'm a constitutionalist, which is outside left and right. I'm sick of the Republican Party, just being another, globalist tool.
Right.
But Joseph Farah, who didn't endorse McCain, on my show just last week, he said, look, Alex, I've never talked like this in 30 years writing for conservative media. He said, I've read the tea leaves. They're going to hunt us down if he gets back in. And then I start looking at other issues, and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have gotten mad at Rand Paul because, what does he know we don't? I mean, Mitt Romney calls the cops on neighbors smoking pot. I mean, he's so goody two-shoes, he's kind of globalist and does bad things, but he's not a Chicago street thug like mafia.
Amen. That is precisely the difference. He is not committed to cutting our throat just because we had our eyes resting for a few seconds. The current president is. And it's a degree of intensity that, Lord willing, can be controlled by a Republican Congress that just doesn't send him bad stuff and doesn't let President Romney get away with nominating bad people. They finally, the Republicans in the Senate finally showed that they had some sort of backbone when they told Harriet Miers, go back to the president's White House. You're not going to be on that bench. And that could be done with a Romney. If
I mean, I thought Obama, even though he had this communist past, it was just kind of his left cover, his little corporatist minion, of kind of monopoly capitalist. But now, more and more, it's like, wow, is this a communist coup within the power structure? I mean, because he's dangerous.
I think so. I quite agree. I'm of the persuasion that Mark Levin has it right, that Obama has to go no matter what. He said, if all I have to vote for is an orange juice can, I'm going to vote for the orange juice can. So when I go vote on November 6th, I'm thinking of actually taking an orange juice can with me.
I tell you, it is unbelievable, the types of things. I've had Media Matters almost on a weekly basis now and Think Progress that are run by White House advisors. They have meetings saying I should be shut down, that Drudge needs to be, I mean, they are just, Media Matters, as you know, a year ago, their internal memos came out where they said infiltrate libertarian conservative media, destroy us from within. This criminal justice department's going after News Corps, who's not perfect, but they're shipping guns to Mexico. Forget phone hacking in England. Right. I mean, I'm really starting to understand that it isn't business as usual where both parties are just corrupt. This is a raving group of criminals.
Yeah, this is an historic crisis. I agree with you. Both parties are substantially corrupt. And I would add one small caveat. I've been very encouraged on the whole by the way the Republican primaries have been going. We got rid of Lugar. We didn't get rid of Hatch because for the last year he's been lying about being a conservative again, and people gave him a pass. But in many of the other Republican primaries, particularly those that were open, no incumbent, the more Tea Party type candidate prevailed. We got rid of Sullivan, who needed getting rid of, down in Oklahoma. There may be some other incumbents that could still go down. So it's not perfect. We're human beings, and we still have to owe everything that we do wrong to Adam and Eve. But I see a more discerning, more concerned electorate this year than even in 2010.
And I think even the power structure is getting scared. Power structure that isn't totally criminal, but somewhat corrupt. They're understanding, hey, this has gone too far. You're going to get totally taken over by crazies if you don't put the brakes on this globalism. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, and I think what could hopefully happen is that a majority of the Republican caucus after this election, because it's not now, becomes conservative dominant. Then even if they don't get rid of Boehner, which they should, but if they don't, Boehner is going to be further restrained and constrained, and he's not going to, for instance, he made it very difficult for Representative Darrell Issa, the head of the Oversight Committee, to even hold hearings and then to have the contempt of Congress vote. Well, thankfully, Darrell Issa I'll tell you what, if I had a candidate for speaker, it would be he. This guy clearly has a backbone. No wonder he made by himself over $300 million. And watching him, even though he's not a lawyer, he was asking questions as one of the best cross-examiners up there. The guy really has a cutting edge, and he could actually make a difference if he became speaker. But even if he doesn't, my guess is behind the scenes, he's got the backbone to tell Boehner, you know what, I'm going to come and give you a wedgie if you don't straighten up.
Well, certainly that is good news overall. Larry Pratt, I've got two final questions. And anything else you have to add, because I know you're very, very busy and need to go here in just a few minutes. But I wanted to ask you here to elaborate, what will Obama do if he is reelected? And then that leads into my final question. You know, I've been very critical of the NRA. You guys are stalwarts. You've stopped so much they wouldn't fight. But I've suddenly, in the last year or two, seen the NRA come out and say Obama wants to ban your guns. Come out and I mean, are you guys forcing them to be honest, or what's happening? Because I had NRA board member, former Congressman Bob Barr on yesterday, and he's sounding more and more like Larry Pratt. I mean, are we the people getting more angry, giving them the moral courage? Because I feel like the gun culture is starting to win, and then all this gun grabbing attempt is like a desperate last attempt.
Yes, I think that's a very good analysis. I agree with that. When you look at the NRA, look at an entity that for many reasons, many purposes, functions the same way a congressman does. And they were never founded to be adversarial. They were founded to help the government work better. The Union officers that founded the NRA were horrified that the Irish immigrants that got conscripted couldn't shoot worth doggone, and those Johnny Rebs were able to shoot a squirrel jumping out of a tree. So had it not been for superior numbers of soldiers they could just keep throwing into the meat grinder, the South really would have prevailed. So the NRA was set up as a handmaiden of the government. We were set up as an adversary to the government. And what's happened is now that we've been around and we've grown and enough people have begun to, oh, there's a difference. Oh, why? I wonder why they're doing it that way instead of with the NRA. And it's thrown enough light on these issues that the NRA, responding much like any other public official that wants to get reelected, is saying, oh, like Senator Hatch perhaps, oh, so you want me to be conservative, huh? Okay, I'll vote conservative. But I just want to keep the job.
Very well said. So in closing, any other key news blurbs? People can get free news alerts at gunowners.org or join and support you. Very important to do. But what will Obama do? What's your intel if he gets reelected? What's going to happen?
Oh, Katie barred the door. It's gunowners.org, and you can sign up for free alerts there. So we do urge people to go there. If the president is reelected, Alex, I think the United States, as we have known it, as it has existed historically particularly, it's gone. We will become a two-bit dictatorship like so many in the rest of the world, and it will take much treasure, let me just leave it at that, to regain a constitutional republic again, because we will then be living under, they will try to disarm us. They will then point the guns at us when in fact the Second Amendment, as I've said before, is intended for us to keep the guns pointed at the government so the government remembers every day, oh yeah, I work for them. Nuts.
All right, Larry Pratt, thank God you're there, because I don't think we'd have our Second Amendment if it wasn't for you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on, because we have a much bigger voice because of you, my friend. Thank you.
Larry Pratt, gunowners.org. Folks, go there, join today. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
And we'll get him on next week on the radio if he can do it, to give us an analysis of the UN treaty. It just came out today. Story, a bombshell, leaked UN treaty does ban guns. If you believe in this type of information and want to see a free press continue, despite the White House attacks on our organization, please subscribe for 15 cents a day at prisonplanet.tv. If you don't support us by spreading the word about the show and financially, you're nuts. We are the tip of the spear, and we are a platform for liberty, and we are risking our lives, our names, our treasure, our blood, our families in the gamble for liberty, because it is no gamble. Life is not worth living if you're a slave. So as for me, I'm all in the fight against tyranny. 15-day free trial, prisonplanet.tv. That's it this evening. Great job to the crew as always. I'll see you back tomorrow night and 12 noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central at Infowars.com for the syndicated radio transmission. Until then, I'm yours in liberty. Alex Jones signing off. Great job, crew.